These 5 novels prove that history is a conspiracy. And today, everyone, we are going to have to put on our tinfoil hats because we are going deep into the realm of story, because everyone is waking up to the fact that historians aren't the sole arbiters of truth, that their objective accounts of what really happened a lot of the time have been meddled with. And us readers out there have realized that the cliche that the winners are the ones that write history is also false. Because if we want to actually discover the truth with a capital T, if we want to go into the depths of the soul, it's not going to happen through facts. It's not going to happen through studying more documents. It's not going to happen if 100 million more people realize what you already know, because hundreds of millions of people already know what you know. It isn't going to happen through his story. It's going to happen through the story, because stories are sentient vessels of truth that are living, that the acolyte mind can sense as truth. Because yes, stories can be manipulated, and they have been manipulated all throughout time, but his story can be manipulated too. But where truth really shines, especially when we're talking about conspiracies, especially when we're talking about the stuff that us plebs never get to hear about, that's been siphoned away from consensual reality, where it shines through most and where it is most actionable is through stories. Because you could read historical account after historical account of 18th century France, but you could just read one novel that's really good from 18th century France and understand more than from all of those historical accounts. You will see history in motion. You will see what it felt like to be there, what it felt like to undergo the French Revolution. Because think of it like this: the history books in the future are going to talk about our fake wars, our psyops, our industry plants, and all of that. But no one is going to understand what we are going through as a collective right now through that. They are going to understand it through our art, through our stories, through videos like this, through what you are doing. We don't need any more information. We don't need any more theories. We need integration, because if you have any degree of depth, if you are engaging in free thinking economics, if you have that creative fire within, that spirit, then you most likely are misaligned with consensual reality, especially if you are honest and open about what you are thinking and what you are feeling. But we only have 2 options, everyone. We can become nihilistic doomer intellectual 4chaners who sit around all day and complain online. My YouTube comment is doing so much. We can move out to the woods and detach from society and say everything is a psyop. This video is a psyop. Existence itself is a psyop. It all started with the WWW, the sin, the original sin, Ian. But one day, all you will be is that 70 or 80-year-old grouchy old man that will say, I knew all this would happen in 2025. Or you could wake up and actually create change and try to make something happen. And that is once again going to happen through the realm of art and story. And that's what I do here on Right Conscious. I talk about the best books and the best authors of all time. Nothing but transformative literature. Pure classics, hard-hitting novels every single day coming to your feed, and that's what we're going to be talking about right now. If you want to join me on my journey of creating a literary renaissance, an educational awakening, so we can actually get something done, then subscribe to the channel, because I got nothing but fire coming your way. And so we have to start at the start, everybody. We have to start where it all began for so many of us. The OG theory, the theory that you cannot get off the ground until you understand. And you guys already know that I am wearing the shirt. We got to talk about the man, the myth, the legend, Lee Harvey Oswald himself. But I'm not going to sit here and deliver the fake JFK documents to you. Because if the government was actually involved in the assassination, do you ever think they would put that information in files that would be released one day? No. This is the same thing with the Epstein files. Anyone who believes that there is anything in there is an idiot. There will be a few nuggets in there, a couple people will go down, but it's all a means to make us forget so that we don't actually pursue the real story. And so our first novel of the day is coming from one of the greatest living artistic minds. And if we think of this word story, what's the highest ideal, the transcendental signifier of story? Well, it is the novel, because as a novelist, you can write hundreds of thousands of words about a topic and have no one censoring you. The only person you have to work with is an editor. And a lot of the time, they're just cleaning up what you are saying. You don't need any funding. You don't need camera equipment, producers, Hollywood, or anyone to approve your message. And the greatest example of this is that William T. Vollmann, one of the greatest living authors, this March is releasing a 1,000,000-word novel, a novel that's like 2,500 pages, all about the CIA. There were no cuts, there was no censoring. It's being released by a major publisher, and he's going to be spitting truth at a level that we've never seen before about intelligence agencies in the realm of art. No other medium has anything close to this. But because that novel's not released yet, we can't talk about that. First, we have to go to JFK. And the greatest novel about the JFK assassination is Libra by Don DeLillo. And when it comes to the JFK assassination, a lot of people get caught up in the facts. The magic bullet, the grassy knoll, the train leaving the station, all of these different facts, rebuking the Warren Commission, even though that's not going to do anything, seeking out the archive files that have nothing in it. But the true story of the JFK assassination is, of course, the story of Lee Harvey Oswald. How did he get involved in all of this? How do these assassination attempts, how do intelligence agencies co-opt these individuals who go on to do these events, to participate in these things? No matter what you believe, what events were orchestrated, how do these people become involved? And I know there are some real kooks out there who believe that all these people are getting cloned and trained from day one, and they're these Manchurian candidates and all of that. And maybe some of that does happen, but in actuality, it's a much deeper process. And we can't just point to, this is where story comes into play. This is where the documents, this is where biographies don't really capture it. We can point to these moments. Well, this is maybe when, Oswald came back from Russia, and then maybe he was involved with these groups, and that's when they co-opted him. That means nothing. Oh, Oswald went to Mexico. Okay. But what type of person makes that decision? What does it feel like? What kind of situation do you have to be in? And how do you have to be relating to the world to fall into something like this? Because for someone like Oswald, that is the ultimate psyop, right? That is the ultimate failure, to be used as a pawn by the government or whoever at the highest level. And so Libra really works as a novel because of its dual narrative. So on one side of the aisle, we basically get Lee Harvey Oswald's entire life, but we get it from an emotional angle. And Don DeLillo is one of the greatest American authors of all time. He is got to be in your top 10, or you have no idea what is going on. He's objectively up there. So we get beautiful writing and very deep reflections on Oswald's life, his emotions, and what he's going through. But there's a counter narrative, kind of this subplot happening that's in the future, that's kind of in recent times, in the 1980s when this was being written, where a CIA agent is going through all the information again and kind of coming to these realizations and being like, wait, what the hell were we involved in? And my job is to activate you and turn you into a deeper reader. And that's why I host the Right Conscious Book Club on Substack, which is the most active and dope book club anywhere online. We meet up and talk about books every single week. We got a group chat that's better than Discord. Plus on Substack, I have over 100 hours of content just like this, but even deeper dives into writing, into literature. Plus you are supporting me. Plus you are supporting the literary renaissance. And because I love each and every one of you guys, my writing is free over on Substack. I host free live streams over on Substack. I post free stuff on Substack all the time. And in January, I am launching the free writing school on Substack, which is the best place anywhere for online writers to promote and amplify their work for free, because I am all about this literary renaissance. And so if you want to support me and join the renaissance and discover other writers who are amazing, go to the link down in the description below, and I will see you guys over on Substack and in the book club. And let's keep this video rolling, because we don't really realize this, but there are certain people in these operations who know, and then everyone else is basically excluded. It's not like every single CIA agent, some dude who's stationed in Burma or wherever, knew what was going on. And you can't just log onto the computer and go pull all this stuff. That stuff is being burned, and those people are being silenced, or they're just not talking. There's also a third narrative in this novel of the CIA agents actually plotting and creating this entire web, that includes the mafia in New Orleans, these independent factions, these Cuban exiles. And it shows how these groups all got roped in, how this entire thing came together. Because if we can't understand how something like this came together with boots on the ground and was able to be pulled off, how are we going to understand what's happening with internet psyops, what's happening online to us right now? And the answer is we can't. You know, everyone's main reaction is to be a Luddite, and people will say Luddite's a psyop term, which was so funny. I got a couple of those comments in my last video. But our general solution is to reject it all. But that isn't a solution. This isn't Hyperion. We can't stage a Butlerian jihad, at least not right now, at least not at the state of consciousness and morality we're at. But the really dark aspect of this novel is that it shows you how something like this can be pulled off, which is a pretty big event that had so many different people involved, and be swept under the rug. That intelligence agencies can kill their own president and get away with it, and most people are just going to move on with their day and do nothing about it. There aren't going to be sweeping changes. These are these litmus tests to see how activated we are as a population. And beat level 1 of the game, which is the Kennedy assassination, then how are we going to move on and fry some of these bigger fishes we're going to be talking about in this video? And just to reiterate, we have tried a million times to show everyone the documentaries, to show them Oliver Stone's movie and tell them all of this information. And how has that worked? How has this front loading of logical information of all the different aspects worked? It hasn't. And that's because the story was shut down. We never got to hear Lee Harvey Oswald's side. We never really got to hear from Jack Ruby. And then, you know, the Vietnam War happens, all this other stuff, and then it's just too far gone for us to be able to grapple with. But I recommend everybody go read Libra because, first of all, it is from one of the greatest authors who's still alive. But also, I promise you, I have seen every documentary. I've read all the stuff. My dad was really into this stuff. On our family bookshelf, we had the Warren Commission report. But when I first read this, I remember I read it up at Mount Charleston in Las Vegas. It blew my mind. I was page turning, man. I ran out of water up there and I had a headache because it was like at 10,000 feet, but I was like, screw it. I'm just going to keep reading. Because once again, it showed me what all of this looked like in motion, what the actual effect of psyops and manipulation and all of this stuff, not just due to a nation, but to people who comprise a nation. And so speaking of nations, we have to next go down to the borderlands, to the home of one of the biggest psyops going on right now, one of the biggest emotional stokers that's dividing and conquering and obfuscating us right now. And you guys already know that I got the shirt on. We gotta go down to Mexico. And I know that so many of you guys have been asking, how can we get these shirts, Ian? And I have finally dropped my literary streetwear. We have so many cool designs, Gravity's Rainbow, and so many other cool books. And all you have to do is go down to the link down in the description below if you want to make the streets lit. Because we've been so desensitized to what's happening down in Mexico or on the border that we just accept the extreme dialectics from both sides. One side will say, we need to deport everybody. Immigration is ruining America. And we go, yeah, let's go bomb the cartels. Let's go invade Venezuela. Then the other side will say, hey, the cartels aren't a big deal at all. Let's open the borders. That won't cause any problems. Because as Americans or global citizens, we can't handle the weight of information. We can't handle the weight of responsibility. We can't even get a grip on our own intelligence agencies killing our own president and many other smaller fish, to fry than the entire border issue. But when you look at what Bolaño does in 2066, he shows you through volume, through length, through a constant barrage, how this entire, it's not even a crisis, it's a conspiracy that's been built by millions of small decisions by cops, by publishers, by bureaucrats, by citizens, by politicians, by academics, by the merchants. And he shows you how history actually gets manufactured, how dialects like we have today can appear as the truth and as the solution. Because when the facts start to pile up, when there's too much information, when too many women have been trafficked, when too many Americans have died of opiates, when too many people have had their life ruined because of our addiction to drugs, which created the cartel, the explanations, the actual solutions just start to slip away. And what 2666 shows us is not some hidden conspiracy. This is not the Da Vinci Code. This isn't some secret unlocking conspiracy. Like, look what they really did. I have the files right here, but it's rather showing you what history is. That history is real and has a core. But we don't want to look at it because it's more ugly than we can possibly imagine, and we have to peel through the layers. We have to peel through the lies and peel through the conspiracies. And then when we finally see it for what it is, we see that for our modern life to continue going on as it does, it requires that more bodies have to continue stacking up out in the desert. That our little existence here in North America, or, wherever it is most of the time built on death. And we think that we're long past our imperialism and our colonialism and all this stuff, and that we're the good guys. We make some mistakes. We did My Lai. We did the war on terror and destabilized the whole Middle East. We did the Korean War. We did Vietnam. We did so many other color revolutions, but we're still decent. We're still good. But the truth about conspiracies, as I'm going to be talking about a lot in this video, and this is where things have to shift, is it's not searching for answers, because what is it going to do? What if you realize it's all a conspiracy, you guys? What if you found the file, you watched the documentary? What does that actually give you? It doesn't give you anything, because you have to attack the engine, because that's the comfort fantasy version of conspiracies. That's the Hollywood version. You go take out the Illuminati and you restore the Fisher King back to his kingdom, right? It's all, and we live happily ever after. It's a goddamn fantasy. What's scarier is that we can all know the truth and find the truth. And it doesn't have to be a conspiracy. There doesn't have to be any hidden documents, no Lolita Island, none of that. But none of us care. It's literally just irrelevant. And even the conspiracy people don't even want to care, because they want the dopamine rush of going and looking at this false flag event or whatever. And so one of the things that this novel does really well, and so this novel is a fragmented novel that has like many different storylines happening that all kind of coalesce and are all kind of on the same theme, which is dead women in Juarez, Mexico, which is the city south of El Paso in Texas. This is where the movie Sicario takes place, at least partially, if you've seen that. This is where Cormac McCarthy's movie The Counselor partially takes place. Juarez is a very intense place. And so what Bolaño does is basically turn this novel into an archive of just all of these victims. There's a part of it called The Part About the Victims, where we just hear about hundreds of women and how they died. And he shows that the more women that are killed, and because of the cartel and all of this stuff that are being trafficked and all of this stuff, he does it like, in one of these sections, he writes like it's paperwork. And you as the reader start to become desensitized along the way. You start to say, when is this going to end? When's this chapter going to be done? When are we going to get back to the story? When are we going to hear about everyone in part one? But within all this, he's showing how, first of all, history can be edited, how a lot of this can be left out, how the police, first of all, can be involved in a lot of this, but can lie about what actually happened, that someone was strangled. Oh, no, she died of alcohol poisoning. How all these little things as a collective, if things get bad enough, can just be totally hid in the modern world. And what's interesting is that over here in America, we aren't dealing with this at scale as much anymore. But it shows you that just because we're in the modern world and we have cameras and all this stuff is going on and we have phones, that corruption in a country and in towns that are 5 minutes away from America, these type of things can still happen. And that's where we get into it. It's not about the bodies. It's not, and this is what's happening with Epstein right now. It's okay. This is what happened. All these people, all this stuff happened. But the system is only trying to make it so that the machine, that the system at large doesn't have to dissolve. There's a beautiful line in this novel about one of these main characters, one of these horrific deaths, and that was a conspiracy that was hidden. And Bolaño says the case was quietly closed. And so that's where a lot of these power dynamics take place, you guys, that we can understand a lot of these truths, but as long as some of it can get swept under the rug, if institutions can somewhat manipulate the story, then it can still retain its survival. Because when you actually think of the machine and what that encompasses how many pensions, how much money, how many jobs, how much power. And if there was even a 10% chink in that, because we aren't spending less under Trump. It doesn't matter who wins. It doesn't matter if Rand Paul won or some libertarian won or whoever won. We're not going to be spending less money anytime soon. We're not going to destroy or actually try to drain the swamp anytime soon. That's just media. It's WWE marketing. And as this novel shows, almost everything, because eventually the heat turns up a little bit and questions start to be asked about some of these cases. But everything that gets done to solve it, it's all performative. And that's what's happening to us. And that's one of the greatest conspiracies of all. Everything that we're going to see with aliens, JFK, Epstein, whatever, it's all going to be performative so that eventually the case can close and they can keep it closed for another 10 or 20 years until we get riled up again, but they can continue to kick the can down the road and not have us focus on the real issues. I mean, those could be economic issues, those could be spiritual issues, those could be educational issues. Those, there's a million different issues that we are not focusing on and that are collectively getting worse, that we're collectively becoming more asleep in, because people think we're going through some form of awakening right now. But in actuality, maybe in your echo chamber, maybe in this online echo chamber, we're more awake. But if you go to the grocery store, most people are collectively becoming more and more asleep, becoming more and more disconnected, which is more and more immoral, more and more controllable. They're becoming less educated and less spiritual. Everyone is becoming fragmented. And so I think you guys will really like this novel, man. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it's long. It's not the easiest novel to read, but it is a masterpiece in its own way. I mean, it really drives this point home that the truth is right in front of us, and we just changed the channel. And I also like, as I mentioned, that everyone is basically indicted in this. The academics, publishers, journalists, everybody kind of gets their time in this to show how it is this system. Like I said, it's much bigger than just blanket statements, which is where we're at right now. And all of it leads to this, beautiful line by Bolaño that says there'll be plenty of time for us to embark on a long holiday of forgetting, which is what we're in right now as a collective of Americans and really as a society. So I love this novel. It has a lot of metafictional stuff related to art and really cool stuff. It's kind of a puzzle novel. Like there's a lot to unpack that. I may be sounding somewhat, coherent, but probably not at the same time. It's a postmodernist novel. It's really good though if you care about the border. There's another great novel by Leslie Marmon Silko about the border that's a little bit more straightforward, but still very spiritual, titled The Almanac of the Dead, which I also really like. That I thought about putting here, but I think 2666, is the gold standard when trying to understand the conspiracy right in front of our eyes that nobody wants to acknowledge, nobody wants to talk about. There'll be literally, there are people every time I say this that will say, "You're an idiot. Americans didn't create the cartel." It's like, dude, if you have an industry that's worth tens of billions of dollars and maybe even more, depending on estimations, every single year, and your country can't supply it, and you have impoverished countries down to the south, who you've also kicked down and made to have revolutions and done all this stuff to exploit, don't you think that they're going to fulfill that? Even worse, this novel also talks about, if we want to talk about the conspiracies, about the CIA bringing in a lot of the drugs, bringing drugs into the ghetto, into certain zip codes, ruining certain communities, ruining our culture, doing so many things to keep black people down, to keep America down, so many different things. If you want to talk about conspiracies, man, that's something that's never talked about. And people will say, it's their fault for doing the crack. Once again, if you put drugs, if you put guns, if you put these types of things in front of people who are in poverty and have not been, or I should say, who were sent to crappy public schools, a lot of the time they're going to not use those things in the best ways. Like it's just cause and effect. And this novel feels like the ultimate message of John Carpenter's They Live, that all of this is just right in front of us, all these conspiracies, all this corruption, all of this stuff. Every single time we watch the news, literally it's right there, but we're not actually seeing it for what it is, which is the greatest conspiracy of all. A lot of this stuff is just put out in the public as a joke, because the people running the show know that no one's going to do anything. It's crazy. Some of the most sadistic shit out there. You know what I mean? It's funny, but it never feels good when you have an inside joke and it's at the kind of behest of somebody else and you only understand it and they don't. And they're like, ha ha ha, but maybe you're insulting them or something. That's what's happening on a very wide scale, but we're not on the inside. So next, you guys already know, we can't have this video without the Illuminatus trilogy. And this book really rocked my socks back when I was 18 years old, because I was a logic bro, you guys. I, was this atheist logic bro. I know it all. I got all the secret documents, yada, yada, yada. So annoying. It's crazy to see now that I'm 32, the people that kept going down that path. And it's like, you guys are at level 1 of the game. You guys are playing Tutorial Island and RuneScape still. But I have to say that the only reason I'm here today is that I read this book right here, Prometheus Rising, when I was 18. They had it at Utah State University's library. And I don't know how I even came across it. But I wouldn't even say today that this is mind-blowing stuff. But for me at 18, back before the internet was this big thing, it blew my mind because I understood that subjective reality was a thing. Then I went down this rabbit hole of understanding synchronicities and deeper levels of conspiracies, not just the facts, but what it all means. And, the epigraph of this novel starts with The history of the world is the history of the warfare between secret societies, which is our boy Ishmael Reed, one of the heroes of this channel. Shout out to Ishmael. We'll have to talk about him some more. And what this novel showed me, because it's almost a parody of conspiracies and conspiracy theories, but it's not, is just the sheer incompetence and chaos of the conspiracy community at large that still exists today. Because what is it? Like, what is being a conspiracy theorist? People say that's a co-opted term, that's a psyop term. But what is it to believe in these things? And Wilson says that it's a way of thinking beyond and between the facts. It's this process of, and that's why it's funny that it is artistic, that it does happen in the realm of story, that there are these facts that we've been given by the historians or by consensual reality, but we feel like there is something amiss there, that, maybe there's some stuff that was left out or that we learn about. And what we have to do is try to make it whole. We have to try and find this hidden relationship. We have to try to connect things that maybe seem unconnected or are these jumps. And it's actually seductive, just like art is, just like anything. It's this process of unifications. It actually creates this dopamine rush when you create these synapses and these connections. This happens just with knowledge in general. You'll be reading something, I'll be reading something and be like, wow, he's quoting, Thomas Aquinas. This is an Aquinian idea or something like that. Then I get this little like, oh my God, like moment in my little nerdy head. But, it create this connecting is a beautiful thing, but it's also happens in the realm of metaphor, right? That's what poetry is. That's what music is. You make these jumps that happen between the conscious and the unconscious that don't make exact sense but feel right. Many metaphors aren't, 100% accurate on an objective level, but they feel perfect, and that's why we like them. And that's the same thing about conspiracies. But you can become addicted to this, and this is how a lot of people go off the deep end, as we say. This is how people start to believe that one certain group is controlling everything, which is like such a day one idea. A lot of the traps that people get caught up into are these traps and this is what this trilogy explores. And what's so good about it, and why it makes, even the people who are trying to figure this out, a lot of the time have their own set of problems and are also wrong. And so it just everything is ruined. That history was manipulated. Then the conspiracy theorists are also struggling because they fall into these certain problems. The first of which being that they think that there is one group controlling everything, which is a framing of reality, which you can see everything through. You think that this one country is controlling everything, and you can see that, and the thinker thinks what the prover proves, and you can view it that way. But in actuality, the truth of it is that's not true. But what it does is create this addictive game of trying to find synapses within everything. And because there's so much information out in the world, it's literally an endless pursuit. You can do it till the day you die, 16 hours a day. This novel also explores the metaphysical angle, that there's this occultocracy, that these dark shadow groups. And I'm not saying that they don't exist, and that these, a lot of these people in power who make terrible things happen aren't, rooted in weird levels of the occult and dark energy and all that, because they are, even if they're not conscious of it, because they're letting this stuff happen or doing it themselves. But there's also this metaphysical paranoia that people think that there is this religious element, or that there's this synchronicity element, that it's all connected through this. And a lot of the time that descends into chaos. That is a problem. And some of the time that can lead to great revelations. And I'm not discounting any of this. But one of the things, so all of that's whatever, that's not exactly what we're talking about here, but it is really good stuff in this novel. But the reason I wanted to include this one is that on the level of conspiracies, it's really into this idea of priming and conditioning and making us feel a certain way, because a conspiracy isn't what happened, right? It's not just the event or the cover-up. It's how we were made to feel while it was all happening, and we're trying to reason what happens after it. Because if it can, if you and I were trying to make a conspiracy happen and we were trying to get away with it, the cover-up isn't just, deleting the files, keeping the people quiet, but making sure the population is primed to go in a certain direction to get them off course and to not ask questions, or at least the right questions. And that's what's been happening in our society and in these communities for a really, really long time. We are asking the wrong questions. And that's the deepest level of the psyop, that the psyop has been created. The conspiracy community has been created so that they go down this direction. And if you don't believe me, just look at how successful it's been. It's not been successful at all. bunch of people calling their senator and asking for the release of the Epstein files, which should have already been investigated back in 2008 or in the 90s or in the early 2000s when we all knew this was happening, is nothing. I mean, I guess it's a step in a positive direction. But, I would say that we were trained to do that we were trained to go down this road of worrying about the files instead of worrying about the actual story. Alexander Acosta, what happened? Who did you get called by? Who told you to give him this sweetheart deal? Bill Barr, why are you working for Trump? And why did your dad give Epstein his first job? Why was he writing weird sex slave erotica? But those are just facts, going deeper and deeper and not searching for a solution because we're never going to get it, but understanding why and how we can prevent ourselves from being primed in future situations so that we can make stuff happen faster. Another thing that I really like in this novel is that we can be manipulated because we're in a constant state of fear, that all of this stuff is going on and we are very fearful beings and this fear is being stoked. But what calms us, it's honestly true, you guys, retail therapy is a real thing, or shopping in general. Going and getting something and consuming can really calm down the nervous system if you are in this very fearful state. Like right now, you guys, like I'm literally out here on the edge. Like I've dipped into my savings. Like I'm trying to grind. I'm trying to make this happen. I'm trying to keep this ship afloat and stay full time. So it's like really hard to not to be kicked into a state of fight or flight because it's not like I can go move back into my parents' house because I have a family now. And what I've seen and what I try not to do, but I try to consciously control it, is that, sometimes through consumption, through going and buying something, going and buying even something as simple as a bag of chips or something I shouldn't be eating. Even before I eat it, I feel better. Before I'm drugged down by the seed oils. But that feeling is actually trying to tell me something. Ian, why are you in this situation? Let's not make this mistake again, and let's work harder. Let's get going. Let's make this happen. Let's make sure everything is okay in the house. Let's, use your time wisely. Conspiracy is not about, once again, the events. It's about the managing of our mood and managing of our attention. This novel, the Illuminatus trilogy, shows you how the perception is created in a very straightforward manner. Libra shows us the story of a scapegoat. 2666 shows how the overwhelming of information makes us not care. And, we can just watch things happen in plain sight. This novel shows how it's manufactured from the inside with a lot of goofiness too. I mean, this is a very goofy trilogy. Is it the most literary trilogy of all time? No, Robert Shea and Robert Anton Wilson are the greatest writers of all time, especially fiction. I think Raw is pretty good at nonfiction. I mean, there's just so much going on here. I mean, it calls out the nihilists. It calls out why most nihilists and logic pros get into conspiracy theories. There's a line in here. A character says something like, nothing is true, so that means that I can do whatever I want. It also does a really good job of, once again, collapsing rationality and spirituality and blending them into this one system that is co-opted and controlled. That the government wants us to become mystical. They want us to be deadheads. They want to, do MK Ultra and do all this because statistics and astrology are the same thing, because it makes us feel like we're in control when we're actually not in control. Whatever it is, that's what we are doing and relying on instead of actually trying to chase the truth, which, that might piss some people off, but it's actually true. It's really funny to see people really deep into spirituality and like that whole, it's just the disease of the right brain, just as logic bros are the disease of the left brain. And so what this novel taught me is actually how to stay sane in this entire web. If you realize that history is a conspiracy, then what? And what this novel advocates for is what I advocate for here: positive educational awakenings. Really just driving people person by person in your life, wherever you can make it happen, waking them up, managing the mood, managing the priming, managing all this, and uplifting, not like motivational speaking type of uplifting, but kind of this uplifting that I'm doing for you right now. We need something to be rooted in. We need to be focused on something and doing something that won't polarize too many people, and we know that can be effective, and we know can't be thrown off track, because if we're getting people to start to free think, if we're getting people to see reality more clearly, not just through facts and random things, but through actually seeing the world in a more religious or shamanic way or whatever, and combining that with deeper levels of thinking and deeper levels of love, that's where things really start to happen, you guys. That's where it happened for you, and that's where it happened to me. But we think that we can just shove other people into that without them having to go through the process, and it's just not true. And so shout out the Illuminatus trilogy, shout out what it did for me, And if you want to understand how we respond to this world and respond to what's going on at a deep level, this is the best novel for it. So, moving on to another American great. You already know that we have to talk about American Tabloid, James Ellroy, everybody. I love James Ellroy. I haven't talked about him as much on this channel, but I've mentioned him at least 10 or 15 times in videos that aren't like titled with James Ellroy. He's one of the best living authors. I love the LA Quartet. I love the USA Underworld trilogy, which this is a part of. And so American Tabloid is somewhat similar to Libra, but it's a deeper dive into that time. It's kind of one of these things, like the 50s and 60s were kind of this freewheeling time of intelligence agencies gaining this new power of priming. They had a lot of power. They had things like psychedelics and the television and the radio and control of publishing houses, the music industry, at least hands in there. And so they really had this power, but our ability to document what was going on because of, that same technology and stuff also increased. And so for the first time ever, kind of this war came out into the forefront where we could actually be documenting and seeing it, but they were able to start doing stuff that they had never had the power to do before. A lot of it, which they learned in like World War II and like the stuff we were all doing, which we'll talk about here in a second, but it really came to power. And so that's why I'm putting two novels kind of from that era in there. There's another one by Norman Mailer, Harlot's Ghost, that I thought about the CIA. I mean, William T. Vollmann's book I talked about earlier is going to be covering this time period. Like, this is where a lot of the tomfoolery started, and a period we really need to focus on because a lot of the archetypes that we are still living in today, a lot of the mindsets and realities, systems, a lot of the thinkers, the music, all the stuff stems from that period. A lot of this origination, we're just living in this derivative hyper reality of it all right now. So it's really important to understand what's going on there. And so, American Tabloid. My favorite part about this novel, and something that Ellroy just kind of plainly states time and time again throughout this entire trilogy, is that as Americans, we are not innocent. And more importantly, that there never was any fall from grace, because that's what's happening with the programming right now. Make America great, keep America great, do all this. There's this restoration ideology that's happening on the right, but also on the left. We have to go back to the New Deal economics, all this stuff. There's this idea that there was some reality that was better, that was more innocent. But as I've talked about, and maybe we'll talk about it in the next book, and if you look obviously at the treatment of Native Americans, the treatment of Black people, and like so many people throughout our history, and just our own, just everybody. And like I said, when you get into the 20th century, other countries, all this stuff, there was never any fall from grace. What that really means is that there was a lot of land out here and it was really cheap to access. There was a lot of resources. We made a lot of money. You could basically just live a very simple life and go to work and have 2 cars and raise your kids and send them all to college, and it was very simple. And that no longer exists. And all these things that we neglected for a really long time and never solved, they're all coming back now, and we're just really upset. And like I said, that could be from both sides of the aisle, whether that's crime problems or economic problems from just trying to spend way too much money to restore make this into some socialist Eden. And what I like about this novel, like I said, Libra, this novel covers the JFK assassination and, many other things around that time. But what it shows is that what happens, the killing of JFK or some of these, Vietnam, some of these other tragedies shouldn't be a surprise. Like what's happening right now and whatever you think is the worst thing going on right now, politically, spiritually, or whatever, is a predictable output about how we've been functioning for a really long time. When you look at the war on terror, when you look at how we related to the Middle East and everything that we were involved in for, decades and 50 plus years over there meddling around with all these countries that we really didn't need to be involved with, of course we would stage something like the war on terror. People think that people think that 9/11 came out of nowhere. No matter what version of the events you believe, that just happened. When you can look, there was a long line of stuff leading up toward the event. And so this novel, out of all of them, is, so Libra was a very obviously sentimental, very literary focus on Lee Harvey Oswald, plus some of these other elements, but it's, somewhat highfalutin. American Tabloid's more on the ground. It's covering, it really follows ex-cops, these hustlers, everyone who's actually involved in it, and we're getting their perspective on like what's actually happening. We actually are seeing the network in action from one of the greatest, I don't want to call him a crime writer, he's one of the greatest crime writers ever, especially one of the greatest American crime writers ever, especially in a literary way. And so we kind of get to see all this from a very high level, and it's really entertaining, which I think that's important. I think it's important, to have some books that are a little bit harder, maybe some books that are a little bit more goofy, to have the postmodernist classics, and just these more entertaining books that really reinforce this idea of what we're talking about, that also have these blunt statements like Elroy likes to make. Because it shows you, it builds up these certain things that we don't get in Elroy about how, it could just be one thing, for instance, blackmail. Like, I won't spoil anything, but blackmail is a really big part of this novel, at least in one instance. There's one person that could change everything, that could change the entire history of America, but someone that he's close to has been blackmailed, and the FBI or whoever it is, like I said, I won't spoil it, is holding this over his head. And what is he going to do? Is he going to ruin everyone he loves life to get this going? Or is he just going to, just forget it and move on? And the problem is, and comes back to the educational awakening, right now we don't have a strong enough moral center. We don't have the martyrs, the people willing to sacrifice everything, including their family, to create these massive changes in our world. And so I love this novel. I think that it does deserve to be on the list. And if you frame it with these questions, if you're thinking about it in this way, like, what am I going to do? How can we raise the moral center of this country? How can we prevent stuff like this from happening? How can we actually see the underworld with clear eyes and slowly pull ourselves out from it? Start thinking about that, and you are on the right track. You don't need any more facts, but of course we have to talk about the big one, everybody. But I saved it the best for last. We have to talk about the big kahuna, and that, of course, is Gravity's Rainbow. When we're talking about history and conspiracies and everything that happened, World War II is the epicenter of all of it. And over the last couple of years, there has been, it's been going on for a long time, but there has been an insane pushback to the official narrative of World War II. Because it's the only war, it's the only crisis that we are not allowed to actually think critically about and question and look at its kind of consequences and downstream effects. And it's not only in our relation to other countries, but as I was talking about earlier. So Gravity's Rainbow features all different types of intelligence agencies, Nazis, British, Americans, and it shows like the crazy stuff that they were doing, these programming systems that they were doing, sometimes to children since birth, like crazy stuff. It shows how in the 1930s, the 1940s, all of this was already in play, that they were already practicing all of it. And so when we think about the downstream effects of programming, and Adam Curtis has a great documentary, The Century of Self, that talks about this in kind of a more lighter way, but I recommend that to everybody. We can see how we've gotten into something like the internet. The internet just didn't come out of nowhere. DARPA, it was literally created by intelligence agencies. But nonetheless, it all started somewhere. It all started way before even World War II. But World War II was the arena where everything could happen. And Gravity's Rainbow touches on every single psyop and conspiracy possible. Literally anything from child exploitation from every single country in the novel, to the spiritual aspects of war, to time travel, to Manchurian candidate programming. But Pynchon, unlike a lot of these other novels, elevates this all to the most literary level possible. Literally turns it into a novel that is integrating calculus, the greatest works of literature, science, spirituality, the occult, religion, and everything else. And if you guys know about Project Paperclip, if you know about, the Nazi scientists coming into the United States or coming into Russia, this novel explores this, because a lot of this novel takes place right after World War II ends, but the same scientists, the same engineers, the same research projects and facilities, the same people that were exploiting and trafficking all of these children and doing all this crazy stuff in the war and profiting off of it, just slide into a different role. Just continue exploiting even in the peacetime. The rocket program just becomes the space race. All the programming that they learned, all the tests that they did on humans leads to them learning how to turn us into mindless consumers. And what I love about this novel is that, at some point you just need to be, it's not good to live your life as a paranoid schizophrenic and feel like everything is conspiracy or everything is coming down and there's a connection with everything. But Gravity's Rainbow makes a pretty decent plea that that's how you should be living your life, because if you do, you may understand actually what's going on. Because he connects everything from the Ivy League universities to the government. It's a web of interconnectedness that makes you think, who really is the bad guys here? Because, as I was talking about earlier, we have these World War II narratives. But we were friends and allies with Joseph Stalin. We were doing insane testing also. And so, yes, the Nazis were the worst, but there was a spectrum also of bad. And even before we got into World War II, we were involved in a bunch of crap. And so this is an absolutely great novel to see this is the highest level, you guys. Like, when we talk about story and integration of art into conspiracies, there's no better novel than Gravity's Rainbow. It will show you the corruption. It literally talks about everything. It's one of the most prophetic novels of all time. Our relationship with foreign countries, that's a big deal in the news today. Pynchon was already on it in the 1960s. Our military-industrial complex, our obsession with the oil in the Middle East, the dark occult, and its relation to child exploitation, all of it was written in the 1960s by Pynchon at a very, very high level, better than anybody who could talk about it now. Like, anything that you were seeing about it now, he did it better all the way back then. And, some people even say, and this is where it gets crazy, that Thomas Pynchon was a psyop, that he was working with the government, that he is the first instance of AI being used, that he was a conglomerate of writers. Like, if you're that good of a writer that people start to say that, then you know that you are really good, you guys. Like, let's just be honest here. We talk about industry plans, but that's not really a compliment. That's like, oh, this person sucks, and they're just like pushing this on the dumb masses. But when people say that this guy who sold tens of millions of copies of one of the hardest novels of all time is the first instance of AI or a group of the smartest people in the world coming together to release something to confuse people, that's a huge compliment. So no matter what he is, Thomas Pynchon is one of the GOATs, and you have to read Gravity's Rainbow. And this year in the Right Conscious Book Club, this May, we are actually reading Gravity's Rainbow as a group, and I would love to see you guys all there when it happens. And as I talked about earlier, the link is down in the description below, so I will see all you guys over there in May, and thank you guys for all the support, and I will see you guys very soon in the next video.